start the tape here. Welcome to week 5 of Women of the Bible. We're going to finish with when we finish tonight, we'll finish with our 20th lady that we've talked about. And we got 23 more. So we're not quite halfway. And we still have a lot of work to do, but I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. Something in common about all the ladies that we have tonight is none of them are named. We've got to go outside of Scripture to find their names, or the Bible just doesn't see fit to tell us their names. And I think that's very interesting because there's a lot that we can learn from these individuals. There's just some neat things that we see from these folks. And when I was talking about studying the Shunammite woman with Elisha, I automatically thought about Elisha's predecessor, Elijah. And a couple of women that you think about with Elijah, you think about the widow at Zarephath who took care of him. Almost in exact contrast with the Shunammite woman that we're going to talk about. Two totally different women, but God used a widow who had nothing to take care of Elijah. And then he turns around and has a lady on the other end of the spectrum, this Shunammite woman who's described as a great woman, and I think he's talking about wealth there. I don't think he's talking about her size or her power. I don't think she was jacked. I think the Bible was talking about her wealth. She was a woman of means. But God took care of Elijah with somebody who had nothing, and then God turned around and used someone else to take care of Elisha. And it's the way God operates. These guys were back to back. So it made me think about other individuals from Scripture. And every single one of these, I really tried to say, all right, here's a character study on who we're talking about. This is what the Bible tells us about that person. We can find a little bit more from either tradition or church history, but what does God want us to take away? I really tried to come back with every one of these individuals and say, what are lessons that God wants to teach us? What are some things that we can take away? So we start off in 2 Kings chapter 4, if you want to go with our scripture here, and we find here Elisha, and there is a woman a widow here that he deals with, but we're going to jump down to verse 8, the Shunammite woman. She is proactive. Something that's interesting about this woman is she makes requests of the men in her life multiple times, and they do it without hesitating, which is, I think, eventually what's going to happen with a certain hole in a certain tree up in Molino way, because a woman makes a request, it's going to happen. Bill honors his wife, and so I think eventually the request is going to be made, and it's just going to happen, because when certain women ask for things, they get done. I just think we see this with her. She talks to her husband. She makes a request of Elisha, and they do it. They just take care of it. And it's not that this was an overbearing woman. We see exactly the opposite. We see that she's very faithful. We see that she's very generous. We even see that she's very content in her current situation. And I mean, that to me is these are women that you just want to spend time around. They're women that are generous with their time, they're generous with their energy, they're generous with their possessions, but they're not asking for a lot of things for themselves. My mother was this way. She was that pastor's wife that no one had an ill word. People had plenty of ill words to say about my dad in the ministry, but no one said any. Even my dad's most vicious enemies loved my mother. They would attack my dad viciously, but say, Darlene, don't take this the wrong way, but your husband is. And so but this was like my mom. She was this person that just gave and gave and gave and gave. And when you asked, what can we do for you? She'd say, I'm fine. I don't need anything. I don't need anything. So she goes to her husband. Well, first of all, how are we introduced to her? There was a great woman, and she constrained the man of God to eat bread. Every time Elisha came around, she's like, you got to eat something. Sit down and eat something. She was ministering to the needs of God's servants who oftentimes wouldn't consider themselves. She said, no, I need to take care of you. I need to take care of you. And so as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. Whenever he came to this city, this is where he ate. She took good care of him, right? And in verse 9, she asks her husband, let's make him a loft. This is where the idea of a prophet's chamber comes from. A place for, verse 9, I perceive that this is a holy man of God, which passes by us continually. Let's make him a room. Verse 10. Let's put him a bed, a table, a stool, a candlestick. And so he's got a place to stay when he comes here. And so churches will do this often. They'll put together a little room on campus so that when that evangelist comes to town with his family, there's a place to stay. And so this is where the idea comes from. And so he comes one time with Gehazi. We know that name, right? He's infamous, and we're going to see Gehazi at the end of our story tonight. He's involved actually with with Naaman's wife's servant girl in that story. But he says to Gehazi, he says, call this woman to me. We'd like to give her something. You've taken real good care of us. Verse 13, behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What can we do for you? And so he's not really thinking about working a miracle for her. He's thinking materially or with position, or would you like to move and be in the king's court? I think is what he's asking. He's saying, I have influence with the king. I can really make your life better. And she says, I'm good. I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna live with my people. I don't need anything. And so he said, what then is to be done for her? So this is a conversation. He tries, and she says, no, I'm good. I'm fine. And so the continuation of this conversation is between Elisha and Gehazi. And Elisha says, what do you think we can do for this lady? And Gehazi says, well, she doesn't have any kids. So Elisha says, cool. We're gonna give her. We're gonna make sure she has a son. Verse 16. And he said, about this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. Now she didn't ask for this, but she secretly really wanted it. And how do we know it? Well, look at verse 16. She said, nay, my Lord, thou man of God, don't lie unto your handmaid. She said, this is too much for me to hope for. She's saying, I wouldn't even have considered making that my request. So this was over and above anything that she could have even hoped for. And so, verse 17, she has the child. What Elisha said was going to happen to her happens to her. So God's not finished. This is not where the story ends up with. As often we see in the life of believers, God gives them the highs on the mountaintop, but he also squeezes them. And he wants to know how they're going to react when they hit the valleys in their life. And it's so that he can demonstrate his faithfulness. It's so that he can put his power on display. So don't, as Peter says, why are you so confused about this fiery trial that you're going through? Why does it seem strange that you're going through this tough time? As believers, we shouldn't be overly surprised when things are really good, and we shouldn't be overly astonished when things get difficult. We should be able to have this consistency of, I'm content. I'm content. Whatsoever state we're in, Paul says, I know both how to abound, and I know how to be abased. I know how to live in debt, and I know how to live with extra. And God has shown himself to be faithful on either side. And so we're going to rejoice and we're going to give thanks either way. And so the child's grown. So this is some years later. He's got a headache. And this is typical dad. Go see mom. Go take the lad to his mother, right? And he sat on her knees until noon and he died. She didn't know what to do for him. I can just imagine what this day was like for her, watching her son die right in front of her and not being able to do anything about it. But we see she does not wallow in her grief. We see another strong character quality of this woman and how she reacts afterwards. Her son is dead. Now, number one, she doesn't move while he's dying. She's going to spend every moment with her son possible. But the moment he dies, she says, take him upstairs. I need to go see Elisha. And she goes to her husband again, and she makes another request. And she says, I need one of the young men. I need a driver because we're going to go visit Elisha. And husband is confused. He says, you're not going to make it in time. And she says, no problem. Things will be well. If I can just see Elisha, he'll make everything all right. So she shows an incredible amount of faith here. No matter what the answer is, she knows that the man of God will do her right. And so she goes. She has no concern for herself. This is not an entitled woman. How does she speak to her driver? She says, don't slow down for me. The road will be rough. I'll hang on. Just go. Go as fast as you can. And so they find Elisha. Elisha actually sees her coming. He sends Gehazi ahead. Gehazi does something with the staff, but it's not until Elisha visits. I think this communication with Elisha is telling. She has a familiarity with the man of God, but she's not disrespectful. She speaks to him. She says, did I desire a son of my Lord? She said, did I ask for this? She said, I said, don't. And she's basically saying, don't take away what I didn't even ask you for. She loves this boy so much, she was afraid to ask for him. But Elisha does her right. He sends Gehazi, and then she decides, I'm not going to leave Elisha's sight. I'm going to stay with him. Elisha comes to the house. The child is dead. He prays, and the child, he lives. Take up your son. Then she went in, fell at his feet, bowed herself to the ground, took up her son, and went out. So just some things about the Shunammite woman that we see here. Number one, she's characterized by her generosity. She's a woman of means, and she doesn't hold anything back. She wants to feed the man of God. She wants to be involved in ministry however she can. And in order to make sure she has a permanent place in ministry, she says, we're going to make this guy a room. We're going to take and we're going to give to God until it hurts. So she has generosity. Then she's characterized by her contentment, her ability to be content with whatever she's been given. She could have asked. Elisha could have granted a lot of different things, but she didn't even ask for anything. They had to go to her and say, you're going to have a son. And so her faith then, if we can just get to Elisha, everything will be fine. She doesn't wallow in her grief. She's not embittered by her grief. We're going to contrast that next week when we talk about Naomi. Naomi went through a tough time, a little more difficult than what the Shunammite woman went through. Naomi's problem was she lost sight of the goodness of God. She accused God of treating her unfairly and unjustly. And when we do that, it's going to be bad for us because we're carrying around a bitterness that's going to affect everything that we do. The Shunammite woman did not stay in her grief. She did not wallow in her grief. She said, I'll go to God and it will be well. It'll be taken care of. And so I know we have ladies in our church that have dealt with miscarriages. They've dealt with stillbirths. They've dealt with, what the Cunninghams went through earlier in the year was late last fall. It was unbelievable. And even since then, I think we've had 2 moms miscarry. I don't know. They don't make a big deal about it. A lot of women keep this private, but the word gets around, and our women know how to minister to other women. And if you've been through this and you know how to share with one of these ladies something that God enabled you to carry, that helped, please share with our younger women. Please share your comfort with them as much as you can. But it's hard. It never happened to me. We didn't lose a child. My 3 girls are healthy. I got one that's sick in the head. You know her. But physically, they're all very healthy. So I don't know. I can say words to someone, but it's going to be empty falling on their ears, because they're going to say, you don't know how I'm feeling. So if you do know and you can share a comfort with them that was not that God gave to you to help you get through this, please minister. But we see from the Shunammite woman, again, her faith. She had the respect of her husband, that when she recommended something to him, he listened. And she used her influence to bring about good for others. She didn't use her influence to bring about something to give herself an advantage. And I think that's something that it should be said of all believers. Whatever influence we have, whatever advantage that God has given us, if I'm not using that advantage to benefit somebody else, I'm missing out. Am I enjoying my advantage and saying, I like it here, I like this seat, I like this perch, I like being ahead of others? Or am I saying, here, you take some of this, you take some of this. Let's all be benefited by this that God blessed me with. And that's what we see from the Shunammite woman. Very generous, very content, and used her influence to benefit others. Any questions on our first lady? Because we'll move along. Proverbs 31, the Proverbs 31 woman. There's probably not a story in Scripture that makes women feel as uncomfortable as the message on the Proverbs 31 woman. And you guys are probably saying, what are you talking about? Mother's Day, they love the Proverbs 31 woman, right? Well, what it does is it holds this standard up here. And many women feel like they're being measured against this standard. You mean I got to get up in the dark and feed my family? You mean I have to start a business on top of everything else I'm doing? I have to do this. I have to do this. That's an unbelievable standard. We're going to look at it from a different point of view. It should be noted that we're not talking about a woman. We're not talking about one woman here. This is, I believe, a story that was given. If you look at Proverbs 31 and how it starts, it was written by King Lemuel. Now, there's no King Lemuel that we can point to in genealogical history for any country. So a lot of people think it was a pseudonym used by either Hezekiah or King Solomon. That's usually the 2 names that you see most often. And so it's very possible that this could have been Bathsheba, who, let's actually take a look at it. It says, the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. And so this word prophecy is not, it actually means a great message. It actually means a great burden that was passed on to him from his mother. So this is either Hezekiah or Solomon or whoever that God used, who's giving us something that his mother taught him. So this is a collection of characteristics about a virtuous woman that a mother is telling her son. That's what the Proverbs 31 chapter is about. So if you look at it from that point of view, it rings a little bit different. This is not a man saying, all right, ladies, here's the bar. Go for it. Let's see if y'all can hit this level and if you can get the 5-star rating as a woman. No, this is a mother who's telling her son, this is the woman that you need to be looking for. This is the virtuous woman. Now, we don't hear a lot about the Proverbs 31 man, do we? But that's how the chapter starts. If you actually read the chapter, mom gives some advice to her son about some things that you should avoid. A man who avoids the wrong kind of influential woman actually talks about alcohol, strong drink, and it talks about the dangers of words. Two of the things that Dennis actually warned us about in the book of Ephesians show up here at the beginning of Proverbs chapter 31. Again, mom is telling her son, let's be careful about strange women, right? Verse 3. Let's be careful about how wine and strong drink affects you, right? And then let's be careful about how you speak. Make sure that when you speak, you're taking up for those that are less advantaged than you are. Make sure that you're speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves. And so he says those things, and then he jumps into this virtuous woman, all right? And so does it help a little bit, ladies, to find out that this passage actually came from a woman, that this was actually a poem that was, it's an acrostic poem, verses 10 through, let's see here, verses 10 through 31 is actually a Hebrew acrostic poem that was given to her son. So you know how sometimes you can go into Hobby Lobby and see those things that are on signs? That's kind of what this is. This is something that's passed on to her son about the highest qualities. This is the all-star qualities of a virtuous woman. And so here's some of the more popular characteristics. We've got from verse 11 to verse 30. She has the trust of her husband. Verse 11. The heart of her husband does safely trust in her, so that she shall have no need of spoil. She doesn't have to play her little manipulative tricks to try to get something from her husband, because her husband gives it freely. She doesn't have to try to manipulate her husband into doing what she wants him to do, because he trusts her. Very much like the Shunammite woman. When she asks for something, okay, all right, babe, okay, that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. We're having a conversation in the fellowship, not the fellowship hall, but the vestibule, the foyer, about, and Rob and Pam came up to talk to us, and Pam was curious about what happens when Jennifer wants something. And I'm like, Jennifer usually gets it, because there's a reason. She has me trained well. I've already shared that with you. I think I shared it with you last week. But I had a craving for this steak salad that I think it was at Bubba's. They served a really nice big salad. And so I'm like, she's like, where are we going to go out to eat on Sunday? We go out to eat once or twice a month. And I said, I'd really like to try that. And so I could tell that she wasn't really thrilled with my suggestion. I could tell that it wasn't sitting well, but she wasn't going to come right out and say. But after a while, she did. She said, I looked at the menu. There is no steak salad on their menu. And so I'm like, okay, where are we going out to eat then? And she started talking about the barbecue place that was right next door. I'm like, I could kind of go for barbecue. But I think after our conversation with Pam and Rob, she backed off a little bit. And so she's like, okay, we'll go to Bubba's and we'll have some. And so that's where we ended up, and it ended up being really good. But I guarantee you that if we didn't have that conversation with Pam and Rob, 5 or 10 minutes later, I would have had the great idea to try out that barbecue restaurant that was right next door to Bubba's. That's just the way it goes. I trust my wife. She's got good ideas. When we do it her way, I'm usually a happy guy. So she knows. I'm one of those guys that I don't really know. I've got to ask her what I like, right? I have to say, babe, how do I like this? And she remembers. She knows how to keep me happy. That's just the way she is. So I trust her. And I think this is what we see here. I know that she's not being selfish. I know that what she wants, it may be, the months leading up to Christmas may be maddening. But I know when we're sitting for those, it's usually 2 weeks of Christmas because we're school teachers. And so we get the 2 weeks of Christmas vacation off. And when we're sitting in the house and the kids are in and everybody's in their pajamas and this family comes to visit, I'm like, yeah, Jen really knows what to do. She knows how to make it really special, right? It's hard leading up to it, but those 2 weeks are like magical. She knows how to do it. She knows how to do it right. And so I trust her. And I think there's a quality. Sometimes you look at the couple that Dennis was talking about, that couple that just has unfortunately learned to coexist. They're not happy. And it's like they're always fighting for power over one another. They're always trying to get the edge, right? That's never going to end well because it's an endless struggle. You have your home turf, she has her home turf, and you're going to defend your turf, and she's going to defend her turf, and it's not a giving relationship, and it's not going to end well. There's no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. It may seem like she's winning, but it's okay. I'll let her win because I know when she wins, I win. So I'm going to let her win. All right. Verse 13, she sets up wool, flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. This doesn't have to be just that kind of skill. She's good at something. She knows what she's good at. It may be cooking. It may be, keeping house. It may be something else that she's good at. She may be good at planning events. She may be good at the home finances. I don't know what it is, but she's good at something here, right? She considers, verse 15, she gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. Okay, I think the key here is she just doesn't seek her own. She makes sure everybody gets what they need. It may not be a 7-course meal because I know different ladies have different specialties and they do different things. But everybody has what they need. Everybody gets what they need. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. I think what we see here is that she's not a drain on the household. She knows how to multiply what gets brought in. My mother, again, never had a job while she never had a paycheck while we were kids, but she knew how to multiply what my dad brought home. She knew how to make it last. She knew when we had Christmas, it was like, where did all this stuff come from? She was one of those that bought all year long and hid it and had it all in her mind and saved and scrimped here and did this here and figured out how to get the best deal on that. We see here, she considers a field, buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. That's somebody who learns how to multiply what is brought in. There's a way to make it last or to make it multiply somehow. And that's a skill. There are some individuals that are a drain. And then they complain that I didn't get enough, so I need more. And I need more, and get sucked into that vortex. And that's not this woman that we're talking about here. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. Again, we're not talking about her strength. We're talking about her soul, her energy, her attitude. She has enough energy to do the task that she has. The woman I'm most familiar with, we'll just talk about my wife again. She struggles with RA, and when it gets to the end of the week, the end of the weekend, she just collapses mid-Sunday. And I know she's got to get up early and go to work, but you know what she started doing now? On Sunday nights, she started taking care of Fallon. And I'm like, where did this energy come from? But she took that on just recently. She calls it, she has a name for it, hedgehogs. It's her Awana class. So she has this little newborn, and I'm headed out to come and have a pastor's meeting at 5:30, and she's holding a newborn baby. And I'm like, where do you get the energy for this? She has the energy to do what God has called her to do. And no more. No more. When she's done, right? She's in bed. I'll come back, and she's already in bed. She's watching her go to sleep shows is what she calls them. And her energy is done. But she took on another task. So it's amazing to me. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. This is something that we saw there with the Shunammite woman, right? This is being generous with what God has provided. She's clothed with strength and dignity. I want us to read verse 25. This is a really neat verse. I think we miss it. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. I paraphrase that here. She can laugh at the days to come. I think sometimes we get nervous about the stage of life. We get, we're about to become empty nesters. We just had to say goodbye to our oldest daughter and give her to a boy, right? She just got married in December, and she doesn't come over every weekend and have a sleepover with us like she did for the last 2 or 3 years. For the last 2 or 3 years, she's lived in her own house, but came home and spent Friday night and Saturday nights with us and went to church with us on Sunday morning. She doesn't do that anymore. She has a new friend that she has a sleepover with at his house. And so Jennifer, at times, she'd be like, I hate this. I hate this. But she has now changed her tune a little bit. And she's learning how to enjoy this stage in life. She's able to talk to Maddie about things now that she couldn't talk to her about before. She's able to talk to her about being a wife and about preparing to be a mother. And again, you can't get to the grandparent stage until you go through the wedding stage, right? You got to go through that to get here, to enjoy that part. So again, laughing at the days to come is better than dreading the days to come. So we should always enjoy the stage we're in and look forward to what God has for us in the future. She watches over the affairs of her household, does not eat the bread of idleness. I think when you walk into a home, you can tell if the keepers of the home have been idle or have they been busy, right? And I realize that now because we have the Wednesday night at the parsonage. I really appreciate you opening your home to us when we had it, because that's my job now. I got to do the dishes. I've got to do the floors. I've got to I got to make sure that the room's ready because we're having guests on Wednesday night. And so my Wednesdays are a lot different now than they were before we entertained every Wednesday night. And so, but now I understand what my wife goes through every time I tell her so-and-so's coming over. And I never understood, why are you upset? Because I know now what it takes to get the house ready for people to come over. And it's like, okay, you just changed my schedule without me knowing about it. It would have been nice to know, more than an hour before they're coming. It would have been nice to know this a couple days ago, right? That bread of idleness, you can go into a home and you'd be like, what's that smell? Or what's that, things that aren't kept well. You can see somebody who's been busy and then somebody who has kind of let things go a little bit. I'll never forget when I was in Little League. Usually we only did sleepovers with people that my parents were really, really familiar with at our Christian school. But this time I asked, can I stay at Ricky Ramirez's house? And he was not a guy who went to our school. He was not a guy who went to our church. He was a guy I played baseball with. And when we went over to his house, there were roaches. It was the worst night of my life up to that point. I mean, it was nasty. I didn't sleep 5 minutes. It smelled bad. She kind of threw some food out for us, and I appreciated again my mom and my friends' moms who kept a good house, because this lady just didn't care. And I felt sorry for Ricky, and I wanted to invite him over my house to show him that life was different. But I have horror, memories, nightmares of that night. It was terrible. I almost called my parents and asked them to pick me up. But the next morning, I was still not asleep. I was awake, and they all slept in. I'm calling my dad. I'm like, Dad, can you pick me up? I'm ready to come home. She has the praise of her household, verse 28, children and husband alike. And I think she finishes very well here. Favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. I think this is what ties everything together, that enables those other things to be possible. again, is the fear of the Lord that's here. And let's see how we finish it up. I think it's helpful to understand this is not a set of expectations for one woman to live up to all the time, but this is an understanding that these things were learned over a woman's lifetime. And like the rest of the book of Proverbs, this is wisdom. These are the lessons that all young mothers eventually will need to learn. These are the things that will be accumulated with a lifetime. Not just something that is, this is the bar that we give all of our ladies who get married and say, all right, good luck. Let's see how well you can do. We're going to grade you on this template. That's not what this is. Again, this is an acrostic poem. These are the praises, the qualities of a virtuous woman. Every verse actually here is led by a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So this was a poem that was passed down from a mother to a son. Alan actually told me too, he read that this is actually not describing a woman, but actually describing wisdom. And I have heard that before, but that this is wisdom does all these things. And when a woman is wise, when a man is wise, these are the things that happen. These are the results. So, but regardless of how we interpret the passage, I think understanding how we get it is helpful. And again, this is not something to make you feel inadequate. This is not something to make you feel like you're a bad mom or a bad wife. This is something that can aid us on our journey. This is something that can help us. It can show us a path and help us learn it along the way. Any questions about Proverbs 31?
I thought it was interesting that in verse 23, her husband was known, and he said at the gate. I thought, that showed that he was well maintained from home. That mom made sure he was presentable.
She fixes his collar and brushes the lint off of his shoulder when he's walking out the door.
Combed his hair.
That's it. That's it. Are you?
Plus, the home was open too.
Yeah.
At times they brought people in.
Yeah, and I think back to that story I told you guys about college when my wife, at that point, she was my girlfriend, soon to be my fiance, when she said, "Are you wearing those pants to dinner?" And I said, "Well, I was, but I can change." She's like, "Yeah, why don't you go ahead and change?" And she was looking out for me. Yeah, she told me later she hated those pants. I thought they were cool. I liked them, but no. As I was walking away, she was like, "Yeah, he's trainable. He's trainable." But I think this idea, her husband is known in the gates. She cares more about her husband's reputation than her own. She's allowing him to be lifted up, and that's important. That's good. That's good. Anybody else? All right, well, let's move on. Let's go back to 2 Kings. We're going to pick up right where we left off in chapter 5. And so we get this guy Naaman. So he's a heathen. He's a Syrian, okay? And we see a story here. He's the captain of the host of the king of Syria, a great man with his master. So we see that he was one of the most respected warriors of his country. Okay, so we've got a king. We've got a 5-star general, leader of the, what do they call that? The chiefs of staff, right? He tells everybody what to do. By him, Jehovah had given deliverance under Syria, but he was a leper. And so the Syrians had gone out by companies, had brought away captives out of the land of Israel, a little maid, for she waited on Naaman's wife. So this was, regardless of whether it is moral or immoral for someone to own another person, this was the way of the world back then. When you won, you took away spoil, and you took slaves. And so you went through and you human trafficked. You took all the kids and you put them to work in your people's houses. That's what happened. And so one of these little Israelite girls gets stolen from her home. We don't know whether her parents were killed or she was just taken from them, but this could have caused this girl to be bitter. This could have caused this girl to be petulant and say, "I hope bad things happen to you. Oh, you got leprosy? Good. You deserve it. You stole me from my home." This was not a little princess. But what did she actually say? In verse 3, she said unto her mistress, "Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy." So let's think of the significance of that statement. Number one, she had the wherewithal to be able to suggest a solution to her master, to her mistress. So number one, so her attitude is thinking of solutions. That's where we start off, right? She's thinking of something, how to make her master, her captor, the one who stole her, how to make his life better. And where does she go to? A prophet of the Lord. She has faith that God can heal this man of his leprosy. She's heard a story. Maybe she's seen something with her own eyes, but she heard and she believed that God's power could do this. And so that tells us something about this young lady right here. So she set aside her own situation. She demonstrated faith in God's power. And then she had the courage to direct that information, that knowledge, to her captors. So that there's a lot that goes into that one little verse. And that's the last time we hear about her. She's done. She just pops up on the stage. She shows I've got the right attitude. She shows I'm willing to try to improve the lives of those who are my slave owners. No selfish, no bitterness, no serves you right. And she shows faith that God is the one who can make this situation better. So just those things. And so what happens? How does God use that? So again, we've got this little girl who's a young maid. She's probably somewhere, she has a memory of these things happening. So we're probably talking about somebody between the ages of maybe 8 and 13 years old. This is who we're talking about here. The voice of somebody that young finds its way all the way to the king of Syria. And I want you to see what happens. One went in, told his Lord, saying, thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. Verse 5, it finds its way all the way up to the king of Syria. Go to, I will send a letter to the king of Israel. Now you have kings talking with kings because of something this little girl said. And so don't ever hesitate to speak the truth in love. What God can do with that, just have the boldness to love people and to try to help them. What God can do with that little comment or that little word spoken in due time, God can do amazing things with that. So we got a king talking to a king, right? And so he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. I looked it up. You know how much that was? I was about $186,000 worth of silver and about $3 million worth of gold in present day funds. And then 10 changes of raiment. Who knows what it cost to make those things back then. They had no factories, so this was people making them by hand. So again, we're talking about an excess of $3 million worth of stuff. Again, this is a little servant girl who makes a comment to her mistress. And kings are now talking to kings, and millions of dollars worth of stuff is being taken from one country to another because of someone saying the right thing at the right time. So don't think, well, I can't do anything to fix this. That problem's too big for me. Of course it is. But God may use what he's leading you to do next to fix that big problem, because this may be the domino that pushes that domino, that pushes that domino, that pushes. You ever seen that video where it's like physics, right? And he pushes that little domino, and that little domino, one bigger, and eventually you have this thing that's the size of the wall that gets knocked down, and all because of a guy pushes that little domino at the start. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing this big, huge domino get knocked over, this wall get crushed because this little girl decided to say the right thing at the right time to the right person. And so don't ever hesitate to be used of God. The temptation would have been to serve grudgingly, to face her work every day. I can't believe I'm not at home. I can't believe, I have to be somebody's slave. She just, look at her energetic lament back in verse 3. We see a little, would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that's in Samaria, ! For he would recover him of his leprosy. She showed tremendous faith. There was no doubt that she believed that this could fix this guy's life. This could take care of. So I think of this saying, bloom where you're planted, right? No matter where you're at, don't show discontentment that, man, I wish I was over there. I wish I was doing that. No, God has you here. Serve him here. He can take what you're doing here at this place and make something amazing out of it. He can take it and he can grow it, and he can. I think now we've got something really neat that's kind of bubbling up with our ladies group that's just kind of getting started. And we have some needs that have presented themselves in our church. And I'm kind of sitting back and I'm kind of excited about these resources being able to minister to those needs. And so I just can't wait to see how God's going to do what he's going to do. I think we've got the right attitude with our ladies. I think we have the right perspective. I think it's biblical. We have a desire for the women who are more experienced and more trained to pass on to the younger women the wisdom and their life experience. And it's just, and we have people that are waiting for God to, they're yielded and they're, God, whatever you have, we're ready to go. So I think it's going to be neat to see what happens. So ask yourself, how many times do we miss out on opportunities because I'm having a bad day? My carnality has me moping and groping, griping and complaining, right? Hopefully not groping. That would be bad, right? Griping and complaining, right? Hopefully so I got a bad attitude and I miss out on an opportunity to help somebody. I miss out on an opportunity to improve someone's life because I'm focused on me. It's all about self, right? So God placed our eternal life not just to stabilize my life with faith, joy, and peace, but he also gave me long-suffering, kindness, and goodness to be able to direct outwards towards others. And so my carnality is going to cost me something, but could also cost somebody else something. And it could cost me an opportunity to get involved in someone else's life. This girl was a useful vessel for God to benefit others. Any questions on our young maid here? All right, well, let's finish up with Pilate's wife. The first few paragraphs, I wrote the first paragraph. The scriptures mention this woman in only one verse. It's a power-packed verse inserted at one of the most tension-filled passages in all the Bible. Christianity.com gives us the following background from tradition and secular historians. So I'm going to let you read through that. The next 4 paragraphs, I just copied and pasted from Christianity.com. I don't know if any of it's true. But that kind of gives you an idea of what a governor's wife that was connected to Tiberius Caesar was connected to. But let's take a look at our verse. Let's go to Matthew 27, and you'll recognize where we're at. We're looking at Jesus being delivered to Pilate, and in the middle of this trial, okay, Pilate has it figured out. Verse 17, therefore when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto them, whom will ye that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Christ? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him. There's political maneuvering going on. But we're going to focus on this lady who I think it was interesting. When you look at this story, we have utterances from 7 individuals that Jesus was innocent. And then we have only 3 of those 7 that acted on that either said something or tried to do something. Okay? And so if you look at this, Pilate, Herod Antipas, Judas Iscariot, the thief on the cross, the centurion, and the Roman guards all expressed belief that Jesus was innocent. They knew that Jesus was innocent. But only 3, if you add Pilate's wife, you have 7. Only 3 of those individuals, the dying thief, the centurion, and Pilate's wife, are the only ones who acted on this belief. What did Pilate do? Well, Pilate, first of all, beat him. And never in the history of Rome did someone get beaten and then crucified. The beating was, again, that was the whole idea of 40 stripes save one, because they thought that 40 lashes would kill somebody, and it was illegal to put someone to death who had not been given the sentence of death yet. So if this guy died while you were beating him, who also was put to death? The person with the whip. So you had to hit him, but you couldn't kill him. And so the verse that starts off, therefore Pilate took Jesus and scourged him, that was supposed to be the extent of his punishment. But Pilate was not gutsy enough. He was not enough of a man of integrity to take a stand. He was a political animal, and to satisfy the people, he delivered him up to be crucified. Pilate's wife, what did she say? Verse 19, when he was set down on the judgment seat, the wife said unto him, saying, have thou nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. So I'm not holding up Pilate's wife as this woman of faith that we should all be like. But we're going to recognize, number one, she was controlled by her superstition, but she came to the conclusion that Jesus was innocent, and she did something about it. Now, for that time period, for a woman, especially the wife of a Roman leader, to try to tell someone, you got to let this guy go. That took courage. That took backbone right there. So the only one we know that was converted, we know that the centurion said, truly, this is the Son of God. And we know that Jesus said to the thief on the cross, today, you'll be with me in paradise. We don't know if Pilate's wife, tradition says that she became a convert, but we don't see anything about her in Scripture, so we don't know. We just see that the believers, what do we see from Jesus' followers? We see grief. We don't see proclamations of him being innocent. We don't see anybody taking a stand until afterwards. Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea, they go to claim the body afterwards. We see the disciples and the apostles' boldness in the first few chapters of the book of Acts. But up until his death, we don't see any action from Jesus' followers at all. From the time Peter pulls out his sword and tries to kill Malchus, misses him and cuts off his ear, we see nobody taking a stand for Jesus, except for the 7 individuals that talked about him being innocent. Again, I think her belief was actually born from her superstition. I think she was a pagan. And I think she probably had conversations that were validated by Pilate. Pilate thought he was innocent. He said it multiple times, right? This should have ended Pilate and Pilate's wife part in the story, because once they were convinced of his innocence, they should have let him go. But they didn't. Again, Pilate was not a man of integrity. He acted accordingly. She had the strength of conviction, at least, to stand up to a powerful man based upon what she believed, and she had more strength of conviction than Pilate did. So let's flip the script a little bit, and let's talk about what should be our takeaway from this. I've heard it said before that sometimes the greatest atheists are Christians. Christians are sometimes the most practical atheists, because we just heard about it in our last session, the armor. We have the ability to withstand satanic attack. We have Romans chapter 6 that gives us the ability to overcome our sin natures. But we sometimes are just too stubborn to do it God's way. We want to do it our way, as if we are the only ones around. And so we fail over and over and over, because we won't put into practice what we know to be true. We won't submit. We won't yield. We want to fight our spiritual battles ourselves, instead of just giving up and letting the Holy Spirit win these battles for us. We want to try to fix people. We want to try to micromanage the situation. We end up screwing it up. We end up messing it up. Believers are oftentimes the most practical atheists around. We have a mighty, big, powerful God, but we want to worry. We want to doubt. We want to be fearful. We want to take matters into our own hands. We want to try to fight our spiritual battles ourselves. We've got a big God. Let's trust him to do what he does best. Let's have the faith and understand that he's got it taken care of, right? We have this incredible recipe for power, but we stubbornly rely on our own strength, virtually guaranteeing our failure to accomplish what God desires for us to do. If we believe that Christ will provide us with the strength necessary to accomplish his will, if we will be led and controlled by the Spirit, then why do we let the flesh control us? Why do we give in to our doubt, discouragement? Again, it's our selfishness. We're too selfish to die to self, to do what Ephesians tells us to do, put the old man to death and put on the new man. Get out of the way and let God have the victory, let God have the glory. We want it. We want the validation ourselves, I think, and we want to be known as this great spiritual warrior. So we got a lot of lessons that we learned from these ladies tonight, none of which God saw fit to name in Scripture. But we see some of their mistakes. We see their good behavior, generosity, contentment, lack of bitterness, faithfulness, ingenuity, selflessness. We see the example of what I see in here as strong women. These are very, very powerful women because of their virtues, because not of their desire to control others, because of these are not women who walked into a room and ran the show. Any one of these. These are women who said the right thing at the right time and used their influence to help other people and were content with whatever they were given. They were content to sit back and not get anything for themselves until it was time for them to step forward and try to do something. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I enjoyed digging into these character studies. Next week, we're going to have another good one. We're going to talk about Ruth and Naomi and Orpah. And I'm trying to remember who number 4 is next week. But we'll pick it up again next week. Any questions? Any comments? Yes, sir.
Just a little comment. Sometimes the Bible only mentions a name or a paragraph or a sentence, or it's unnamed. And we don't. In some places, they have lots of narrative on that person. We don't understand why. But if there's a lesson, like you said, or a character trait or anything, God covers that many, many times. But if it's just an individual, he's not putting an emphasis on that individual. It's on that trait. And
right.
Sometimes you may get someone ruling for 30 years and they get one sentence. That's it. And we don't understand why.
But I think you're right. I think God is emphasizing maybe the character quality more than about the name, the person. And you guys remember what Autumn was saying in her testimony yesterday when she was talking about David. It took her a while to get there, but I think she ended up getting there. She's like, you have this guy David who, when you compare his behavior with Saul's behavior, David was not much better than Saul. But why was it that David was the man after God's own heart? And I think, again, we look at it, it's not because David was this spectacular person who had these amazing qualities. He was a murderer, an adulterer, a man of blood who God wouldn't even let build the temple for him. But God wanted to do something with this little redheaded kid. God had something he wanted to do. He wanted to call it's the throne of David. So we think of the principle, God doesn't often use the rich, the mighty, the noble. He often uses the foolish and the weak for his purposes so that he can get the glory. I think he wants us to be thinking about him and not fixating on people and personalities. I think we get lost sometimes when we become like the Corinthians who say, I'm of Paul or I'm of Apollos, right? I'm a follower of this guy. I'm a champion of this guy. Well, find the good qualities in that person and learn your lessons, but don't idolize somebody. So I think you're right. I think that's the way God does that. Good point. Somebody else? All right, well, let's close in prayer, and then we'll dismiss you guys. Father, we love you. We thank you for the time that you've given us. Thank you for the opportunity you've given us to fellowship with one another, and I pray that you give us safety all to our homes, and ask it all in your Son's precious name. Amen.